What if the one person you tried your whole life not to want was the only person who ever truly saw you? The storm clouds were already rolling over the Montana sky when Clayton Rudd stepped out onto the porch of his ranch house. The autumn air carried the smell of sage, dust, and something else he couldn't name. Maybe regret, maybe hope, maybe both at once. He set his coffee mug on the railing and watched his ranch hands push the yearlings toward winter pasture. At 34 years old, Clayton had everything a man was supposed to want. 3,000 acres. A herd of 800 strong. A name folks respected from Billings to Great Falls. Everything except a wife. And lately, it seemed like everyone in Cedar Ridge thought that was a tragedy. Clayton remembered Mrs. Hattie Drummond's voice just last week, sharp as a sewing needle while she'd stood on this very porch. A man like you ought to have little ones filling this house. It ain't natural, you rattling around in here alone. He'd smiled politely, the same way he always did, while she listed another perfect woman for him to meet. He'd already tried. 5. 5 women. 5 polite rejections. 5 rides back home wondering if there was something broken in him, but deep down, he knew better. He wanted something real. Something steady. Something warm enough to melt the cold nights and strong enough to weather the hard ones. He just didn't know where to find it. The door behind him opened with a soft creak. Ella Torrance stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. She offered him a warm smile that didn't ask anything of him. "Coffee's getting cold," she said, taking his empty mug. Her fingers brushed his. Too soft, too familiar, too dangerous. "Thanks," Clayton murmured, watching her head back inside. Ella had been in his house for 4 years. She had walked into his parlor with her chin lifted and her voice steady, even though she had lost her husband only weeks earlier. She'd been desperate, cold, and stubborn as a mule. "I can cook, clean, mend, and keep accounts," she'd said. "Room, board, and fair wages. That's all I ask." He'd hired her on the spot. 4 years later, she was the quiet heartbeat of the house. She knew every creaky floorboard and every broken hinge. She kept the ranch running smoother than any hired man he'd ever paid. But she wasn't his to want. Or so he told himself. 3 riders approached from the main road, dust rising behind them. Clayton recognized Tad Crowley in the lead. His friend. His rival. A man who could charm a rattlesnake if he wanted. "Morning, Clay," Tad called as he reined in his horse. The 2 hands behind him followed, silent and respectful. Clayton nodded. "Morning." Tad wiped sweat from his brow. "Heard the cattle buyers from Chicago are coming next month." Clayton's brow tightened. Those buyers were picky. They paid big, but only contracted with ranchers who had stable operations, often family operations. "How many head are they looking for?" Clayton asked. 500. Premium stock only. Clayton gave a slow nod. "I can meet that." Tad's grin widened, half friendly, half provoking. "Maybe, but you know how buyers are. They want men with families. Wives who can host them. Makes a place look settled." Clayton felt the jab land deep. He kept his voice calm. "We'll see come spring." Tad tipped his hat. "We will." When the riders disappeared down the road, Clayton stayed on the porch longer than he needed to. Tad's words scraped at him like sandpaper. A man wasn't complete until he had someone waiting at the window for him, someone who cared if he came home at all. The door opened again. Ella stepped out with a second mug of coffee in her hand. She sat beside him, the way she had started doing in the quiet early mornings. "Trouble?" she asked softly. "Nothing I can't handle." She didn't push. She never pushed. She just sat beside him, looking out at the valley like it belonged to both of them. Clayton stole a glance at her. At the warm brown of her hair, at the steady strength in her posture, at the small smile she wore when she looked out over land she had come to love as much as he did. Not beautiful in the way women in town were beautiful, but beautiful in a way that stayed with a man. Beautiful in a way that felt like home. "I should get started on laundry," Ella said, standing. "Ella?" She turned back. He wanted to say something, anything, but all he managed was, "Do you need anything? Supplies? Repairs?" Her eyes softened. "Nothing I can think of, but I'll let you know." She stepped inside, and the house felt colder without her. He didn't know it yet, but that small moment, her hand brushing his voice catching in his throat, was the start of everything. The Helena stagecoach arrived early that day, rumbling into Cedar Ridge like a warning. Mrs. Drummond found him in town before he could even load his supplies. "She's here," she squealed. "Miss Sarah Montgomery, a banker's daughter. Refined, intelligent, pretty as a picture." Clayton sighed, lifting a sack of grain onto his shoulder. "You've got tea with her tomorrow at 3, she stated. "Wear your good suit." Good suit, good manners, good impression. A good man for a woman he didn't even know. He thought of Ella, her steady hands, her quiet laugh. Her place at his breakfast table. He pushed the thought away. Sarah Montgomery was everything he was supposed to want. Everything that would make him look settled, respected, worthy of the best cattle contracts. Maybe it was time to stop being stubborn. Maybe it was time to accept the sensible choice. But that night, as Ella handed him a warm plate of beef stew and smiled like she was glad he had come home safe, Clayton found himself wondering something he had never dared to ask. What if the sensible choice wasn't the right one? And what if the right one had been under his roof all along? What if the moment you stop chasing something is the moment you finally see what's been standing right in front of you? The next afternoon, Clayton stood outside the Cedar Ridge Hotel in his good suit, tugging at the collar like it was choking him. The starched fabric felt stiff, wrong, foreign, nothing like the loose shirts and worn denim he wore every day on the ranch. Still, this was what a respectable man did. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. Miss Sarah Montgomery sat at a corner table, elegant as a painting. Golden hair pinned perfectly, gloves smooth and white, her posture straight as a ruler. One look and Clayton knew she was everything a bachelor rancher was supposed to want. Everything, except familiar. "Mr. Rudd?" she asked with a delicate smile. "That's me," he said, feeling all elbows and awkwardness as he took her hand. The next hour passed like a job interview. Polite conversation, small smiles, measured questions. Sarah was knowledgeable, pretty well-spoken. She asked about ranching, about cattle, about land. Everything she said was right. But nothing she said felt warm. Nothing felt like home. After tea, she asked to see his ranch. Clayton agreed. It seemed the proper thing to do. But as they drove the buggy across the open valley, he kept thinking of Ella warming coffee on the stove that morning, humming to herself, hair falling loose from her pins. He shook the thought away. Focus. This was what he was supposed to want. When they reached the ranch house, Sarah stepped down from the buggy, looking around with wide, impressed eyes. "What a substantial property," she said. "I imagine it takes quite a woman to run a home like this." Before Clayton could respond, Ella stepped out onto the porch. She wore her Sunday best dress. Simple brown wool. She'd taken care with her hair. Yet next to Sarah's shining blue riding habit, she looked painfully plain. Clayton's stomach twisted. "Miss Montgomery," he said. "This is Mrs. Torrance, my housekeeper." Sarah offered a curt nod. "How do you do?" "Ma'am," Ella replied politely. Clayton saw it, a flicker in Ella's eyes. Sharp, quick, gone. A sting she tried to hide. It bothered him more than it should. Ella led them inside, bringing out fresh coffee and apple cake. She moved with her usual grace, quiet in the background, making everything easier without drawing attention. Sarah, meanwhile, continued pointing out curtains she'd replace, wallpaper she'd change, rooms she'd prefer arranged differently. Clayton answered politely, but each improvement felt like a small stone dropped in his gut. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Outside, old Otis Parnell came jogging over, breathless. "Boss, the creek fence is down," he said. "Something spooked the herd. We've got cattle breaking through." Clayton's instincts kicked in. "Anyone hurt?" "No, but we gotta move fast." "Go saddle the horses. I'll be right there." He turned to Sarah. "I'm sorry, I should—" "Oh, don't let me stop you," she said brightly. "I'd love to watch. I find ranch management fascinating." Clayton hesitated. "It could be dangerous." She waved her hand. "Nonsense. I'll stay out of the way." She didn't. For the next 2 hours, Clayton and his hands chased down strays, fixed fencing, soothed a spooked mare, and hauled tools through mud. Sarah followed along, skirts lifted, asking questions, smiling like it was entertainment. But Ella stayed back at the house. Watching from the porch, hands tucked in her apron, worry lines creasing her brow. Ready to help, ready to react, ready for him. When the job was done, Clayton found Sarah amusing, charming, perhaps even impressive. But as he rode toward the porch, Ella stepped out to meet him with a warm towel. "You're soaked," she said gently. "You'll catch cold." The way she said it, so simple, so real, hit him like a blow. He took the towel. Their fingers brushed. He looked at her, really looked at her. That's when it happened. Just a moment, just a flicker, but the truth hit him like a hammer. He didn't want Sarah Montgomery. He wanted Ella. The problem was, he had no right to want her. That night, over a simple meal of beef stew and warm bread, Clayton found more peace in listening to Ella talk about ranch chores than he had all day with Sarah's polished conversation. But the peace didn't last. 2 days later, Otis Parnell walked into the barn with his hat in hand, his face tight. "Boss," he said, "you'd best ride into town." "Why?" "It's about Miss Montgomery." Clayton's stomach dropped. "What about her?" Otis cleared his throat. "She was seen having dinner at the hotel last night with Tad Crowley." Clayton froze. "And this morning, too." At the cafe, Vernon Pike said they were holding hands. The hammer fell. Clayton didn't speak. He didn't curse. He didn't even breathe right. He saddled up, rode into town, and found them standing outside the hotel. Too close, smiling too wide. Both of them startled when they saw him. The guilt in their eyes told him everything. "Clay," Tad started, "this ain't—" "It ain't what?" Clayton asked softly. "What it looks like." Sarah flushed pink. "Mr. Rudd, "Ma'am," Clayton said, touching the brim of his hat. Safe travels back to Helena. That was all. He didn't argue, didn't fight, didn't ask why. He just walked away because some lessons cut deep the first time. He'd chased the idea of a woman like Sarah Montgomery for years, and she'd chosen the first man who charmed her. The road home blurred through dust and regret. But when he reached the ranch, he found a lantern waiting on the porch, and Ella standing in its glow. She stepped forward. "I heard," she said simply. Clayton swallowed hard. Everyone heard. They stood in silence until he finally spoke the truth he hadn't been ready to name. "Maybe it's for the best," he whispered. Ella searched his face gently. "Is it?" Quote. Clayton looked at her then, really looked, and something inside him finally broke open. "I don't know what I'm looking for anymore," he said. Ella's voice softened. "Maybe you do." She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell apple soap and warm bread, close enough to feel her breath, close enough that the whole world fell quiet, except for the beating truth he had been running from for 4 years. He didn't say it aloud, but it echoed in the space between them. It was her. It had always been her. And neither of them were ready for what would happen next. What if losing something you never truly had is what finally shows you what you can't live without? The first winter storm of the season came roaring over the mountains like a living thing. Rain hammered the ground. Wind tore through the ranch yard. Thunder rolled across the sky like angry drums. Clayton was in the barn when it hit full force, securing gear and checking the horses. Rain blew in sideways, soaking him just from the doorway. Through the sheets of cold water, he saw Ella and young Vernon Pike racing to pull the laundry off the line before it blew clear into Wyoming. In seconds, both of them were drenched, clothes plastered to their bodies, hair dripping, boots sinking into the mud. Clayton ran out to help, but the storm was faster. Wind ripped 2 sheets from Ella's hands and flung them into the dark. Lightning cracked so close it rattled the ground. "Get inside!" Clayton shouted. They sprinted, slipping in the mud, the rain blinding them. By the time they reached the porch, they were dripping from head to toe. Vernon dashed toward the bunkhouse. "See y'all in the morning." Clayton and Ella stood alone on the porch, rainwater running off the roof like a waterfall. Their breaths came heavy, their clothes clung tight. The storm poured over them wild and relentless. But nothing was louder than the silence between them. Ella wrapped her arms around herself, shivering so hard her teeth clicked. Her hair was loose, dark curls sticking to her cheeks. Her dress, soaked through, outlined every curve. Clayton tried to speak, but she beat him to it. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. He blinked. "Do what?" "Pretend," she said, voice trembling with cold and truth. "Pretend that I don't see the way you look at me some days. Pretend I don't hear the things you leave unsaid. Pretend I don't feel something every time you walk into a room." Clayton's heart pounded like a fist against his ribs. "Ella, I know I'm just your housekeeper," she broke in, voice cracking. "I know I'm not refined or polished like the women you're supposed to marry. But I'm so tired of acting like I don't want you." She took a shaky breath. "I'm soaking wet, Clayton," she said, voice low and thick with 4 years of longing, "and it's not from the rain." The storm raged around them, but Clayton didn't feel it anymore. He reached for her, slow at first, as if to give her time to run. She didn't, not even a breath of hesitation. She stepped into him, fists gripping the front of his wet shirt. He kissed her. Years of denial broke open like a dam. Her hands slid into his hair, his arms locked around her waist, lifting her, pressing her against him as the storm howled and lightning lit the sky. They didn't stop until they were breathless. "I've been such a fool," Clayton whispered against her forehead. "You've been right here, all this time, right here." She leaned into him, shaking. "I thought you'd never see me." "I see you," he promised, holding her tighter. "I've never seen anything clearer in my life." He pulled her inside before the cold could steal her warmth. The kitchen was dim, the fire low, but it was enough. Ella knelt to stoke the flames while Clayton lit lamps with trembling hands. "You need dry clothes," she said softly. "So do you," he answered. They stood close. Too close. She looked up, face flushed from heat and everything they hadn't said. "Clayton," she whispered, "if we cross this line, we can't go back." "I don't want to go back." He touched her jaw, brushing away a raindrop, or maybe a tear. "What do you choose?" he asked. "You," she breathed. "I choose you." Quote, "The storm outside grew wild, but inside the small warm kitchen, a different storm began. One made of love long hidden, craving long denied, two hearts finally finding their home. 3 days later, they were still moving carefully around each other, touching by accident, then on purpose, smiles lingering longer than before. But neither had said what came next. Then Vernon rode in with the mail. "Special delivery for Mrs. Torrance," he said uneasily. "Came from Ted Crowley." Clayton stiffened. Ella opened the envelope, her brow furrowed. "He's offering me a job," she murmured. "Housekeeper. $50 a month, more than double what you pay me." Clayton's heart dropped. "And," she added quietly, "extra incentives." "Incentives?" Clayton repeated, each word like a blow. Ella swallowed hard. "He invited me to dinner tomorrow night to discuss the position." Dead silence. Clayton's jaw clenched. "You're considering it." Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to consider. I don't know where I stand with you. I don't know what happens if you meet another Sarah Montgomery." Clayton stepped closer. "Ella." "Don't," she said, backing away. "Not unless you can tell me the truth." She walked into the house, leaving him in the yard, rainwater dripping off the porch from the storm 2 days ago. Clayton had faced stampeding cattle, rustlers, freezing winters. But nothing hurt like watching Ella walk away. The next night, Clayton paced the porch like a trapped animal, waiting, praying. Finally, Tad's fancy carriage appeared. Ella stepped down, her expression unreadable. Clayton's heart felt like it was splitting open. "How was dinner?" he asked carefully. "Informative," she said. "Mr. Crowley is persuasive." "Ella," Clayton swallowed. "Tell me what you're thinking." She lifted her chin, steady and brave. "I'm thinking I can't build a life on half answers. I'm thinking passion isn't enough. I'm thinking I deserve to know if you see me as a partner or as a temporary comfort." Clayton reached for her hand, voice breaking. "Don't go to Crowley's," he whispered. "Don't leave, not because I'm jealous, not because I'm scared, but because I love you." Ella's breath caught. I love you, he said again, stronger now. Marry me. Be my partner. My equal. My home. Silence. Then her lips trembled into a smile. You really mean it? Quote, with everything I am. She reached into her reticule and pulled something out, his hat. You left this in the parlor, she said softly. A woman returning a man's hat can mean a lot of things. Clayton felt hope rise like dawn. What does it mean now? He asked. Ella placed the hat in his hands. It means I'm choosing you, she whispered. I'm staying. If you'll have me. Clayton swept her into his arms, kissing her hard, kissing her like he'd found the last missing piece of his life. I'll have you, he murmured. All my days. 3 weeks later, under a crisp November sky, Clayton Rudd married Ella Torrance in the White Church by Cedar Creek. Half the territory came. Even Tad Crowley tipped his hat with a rueful grin. You got a good woman, Clay, he said. Don't you dare lose her. Clayton smiled. Never, quote. As they stood on the church steps, Ella slipped her hand into his. What are you thinking about, husband? She asked gently. Clayton kissed her forehead, full of the peace he'd chased for years. I'm thinking, he said, that sometimes what a man spends years searching for was waiting at home all along. Ella smiled softly. And I'm thinking, she whispered, that I'm soaking wet. Clayton raised a brow, teasing. Not from the rain, she added, cheeks pink, but from being this happy. He laughed, pulled her close, and together they stepped into the bright Montana sunlight toward the life they would build, side by side, heart to heart, forever.